I was halfway through a 3 a.m. bug fix, sweating under the flickering light of my kitchen ceiling fan, spoon deep in expired yogurt and 4 days past a shower, when the founder's nephew, bless his vape-scented soul, pinged me on Slack asking if our main server thingy was feeling okay. Feeling okay? Buddy, it's one reboot away from writing its own suicide note, just like me. That was my third overnight that week. Sixth, seventh, who's counting? Every time something went sideways, which, in a tech startup built on ego, Red Bull, and one glorified whiteboard sketch, was every 38 seconds it was me they called. Not Derek, the so-called CTO who once confused cash with cash. Not the founder's daughter, Brittany, who listed Chief Inspiration Officer on her LinkedIn and spent most mornings reposting quotes about hustle culture over pastel lattes. Me, Linda Clark. I was the duct tape holding the engine together while the rest of them rode shotgun, shouting ideas and lighting matches. They all got titles. Fat ones, flashy ones. Titles so heavy they practically needed neck braces to hold up their LinkedIn bios. Meanwhile, I was just Linda from Ops, or hey, can you check on this thing? I once found myself listed on a pitch deck as support staff right between snacks and facilities and interns, if available. 6 years. 6 goddamn years. Through pivots, layoffs, funding winters, bad code, worse code, and that one time the founder's dog chewed through the Ethernet during a live investor demo, I carried that company like a baby strapped to my chest. And it still spat up in my face. Oh, and speaking of carrying things, if you're still listening and haven't hit that little red subscribe button yet, go on, give it a click. 90% of folks listen without subscribing, but it really helps the team keep bringing these stories to life. And hey, throw us a like if you've ever fixed someone else's mistake while they were off playing CEO on Instagram. You know who you are. Anyway, where was I? Ah, yes, the email. The email that told me everything I needed to know without saying a word. It was from Derek, or D-Money as he signs his emails, which should have been the first red flag. Subject, final org chart investor facing. I clicked it out of habit more than curiosity, expecting to find my name buried somewhere in the middle like always. But I wasn't there. Not in ops, not in tech, not even in the fine print. I searched Clark. Nothing, I searched Linda. Nada. It was like I'd never existed. Like the digital sweat, the crisis plans, the emergency migrations, the 70-slide compliance deck I wrote solo at Thanksgiving had all evaporated. Instead, there was Derek CTO, Brittany Chief Brand Officer, and this one got me, Chairwoman Emeritus, Judith H. Lancaster, Strategic Legacy Oversight. Judith, the founder's mother. Now, Judith is the kind of woman who smells like hard candy and disdain. She once told me during a holiday party that I had the voice of a secretary and the posture of someone who works retail. Charming. She thought Scrum was a type of sea creature and openly referred to our cloud infrastructure as digital witchcraft. And now she was Chairwoman Emeritus. Strategic Legacy Oversight. She couldn't operate a printer, but she had a seat at the table. Me? I got a text from our intern asking if I'd be helping with name tags for the acquisition dinner. That's when the quiet dread started. Not loud, not scream-worthy, just still. Like standing in the eye of a storm you didn't realize was already halfway through your house. They were planning to cut me out. No explanation. No thank you, no back alley conversation or severance handshake. Just deleted. I sat there staring at the screen, the email glowing back at me like a middle finger in Arial 12 PT. I thought about calling the founder. Asking, pleading even. But then I remembered something. A conversation. 2 weeks prior. I was in the conference room with outside counsel, combing through contract language on IP assignments. The lawyer had flagged something, half-jokingly, about primary architect attribution. I'd asked a follow-up question. He raised an eyebrow, then nodded and said he'd tighten the clause just in case. Just in case. Turns out just in case was now. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I didn't even scream into a pillow. I just sat back, finished my yogurt, and stared at my name, missing from a future I helped build. And I started to plan. Because they thought I was gone. They thought wrong. The day of the investor dinner felt like prom night for the company, only with fewer hormones and more khaki. The caterers were buzzing around like caffeinated bees, string quartets were tuning instruments like this was Versailles, and the staff were pretending they didn't know the founder used to eat hot dogs over the server rack during all-nighters. Was there early? Because of course I was. I'd spent the last 48 hours making sure our licensing documentation matched the actual IP registry, something none of the C-suite geniuses had thought to verify. And let me tell you, there's no cocktail dress or teeth-whitened smile that can fix a botched licensing timestamp when due diligence lawyers get involved. I was double-checking table assignments, because no one else had bothered to print the latest seating plan. When Brittany, draped in sequins and empty ambition, minced over and tapped her acrylic nails against the plastic list. "Oh, Linda," she chirped, voice pitched to the tone of someone speaking to a confused toddler. "Yeah, you're not on the main table. We've got family and execs there. You'll be with vendors." Vendors. I had personally onboarded 3 of the companies sponsoring this acquisition. Brittany once asked me if a 409A valuation was a Pokemon. "I see," I said, staring at my name nestled beside the catering team and someone labeled ambient violinist. Before I could respond, or more accurately, before I could decide if I wanted to respond or just flip the damn table, Judith made her entrance. And when I say entrance, I mean it. Red power blazer, pearls that probably whispered slurs, that perfume cloud that smelled like funeral parlor mixed with citrus vengeance. She clocked me instantly, because Judith's internal radar only lit up for things she considered threats or beneath her. I was somehow both. What are you doing hovering like a fruit fly, Linda? She barked, right there in front of a junior dev, a marketing intern, and two investors' assistants who suddenly became very interested in their name tags. I was confirming seat placements, I said. Calm, professional, too damn tired to match her pitch. Judith squinted, cocking her head like a crow, deciding whether to peck your eyes out. You? At the investor dinner? Please. Slackers don't sit with closers. She let it hang there like a fart in church, and I let her, because I wasn't here for the chicken skewers or the seat next to Derek and his IPA breath. I wasn't even here to smile and wave and pretend the founder hadn't spent 6 years promising me official recognition when the time's right. I was here to witness, to see it all come together, to watch it unravel. I turned on my heel without a word and walked back toward the prep room, but not before letting my hand brush the leather-bound legal packet sitting on the check-in table, the one with a small, unremarkable folder inside. The folder I'd slipped in personally 2 weeks ago. It looked like any other insert. Legalese tucked between acquisition summary pages and IP schedules. Nothing flashy. No screaming headline. Just one clause, updated. Reviewed by counsel, approved quietly, and now sitting right there in front of the buyer's team. That was the move. Not some viral moment or chair-flipping speech. No tearful email. No dramatic tweet storm about being an unsung female architect in tech. No, my move was buried in footnotes, hidden beneath routine, signed in blue ink and filed where it mattered. I didn't need the spotlight. I needed the contract. And while Judith was berating me in front of a crowd half my age, I kept my eyes on the one thing that still had my name in it. Page 47. Clause 9b. Designation. Primary architect of record rights. Veto authority over post-acquisition licensing and IP asset transfer. Condition. Consent required in writing from designated architect prior to execution of sale. Signature on file. LM. Clark, and not a single one of them had read it. Not Derek, not Brittany. Certainly not Judith, who probably thought clause was just how British people said clause. That folder was already loaded. Now I just had to wait for someone to pull the trigger. And I could feel it coming, like pressure building behind drywall. The hairline crack already spreading. They thought tonight was their coronation, but all I saw was a countdown, and I knew exactly when it would hit 0. I didn't even stay for the appetizer round. Left before the speeches started, before Brittany could butcher her tech family journey spiel or Derek could make some groan-worthy crypto joke about investing in people, not coins. The air in that hotel ballroom was thick with self-congratulation and off-brand cologne. I couldn't breathe in there. I slipped out the service entrance like a ghost. No scene, no exit music. Just me, my purse, and the cold bite of night air cutting through my blazer as I walked 3 blocks in silence to where I parked, because apparently only executives got valet codes now. Back home, I kicked off my heels, peeled off my blazer, and sat down at my old, sticker-covered laptop. Same one I'd used to clean up the product's API documentation back when it was still duct-taped together by borrowed code and good intentions. I stared at the screen for a long minute, not thinking, just breathing. Then I opened my email. There was a draft sitting there waiting. Subject per discussion clause inclusion confirmation to acquisitions legal at. Com attached 1 PDF, 3 pages, clause highlighted. My cursor hovered over the send button. And for a second I hesitated, not out of doubt. I knew exactly what I was doing. No, the hesitation was ritual, like taking a breath before a dive. Like pressing your fingers to the trigger just long enough to remember what you're about to change. Then I clicked it. The whoosh of the email sending was barely audible, but it echoed in my head like a starting gun. Because that wasn't just a file, that was leverage, and they'd handed it to me. Rewind 4 weeks. We were in the thick of the diligence sprint, 50 tabs open, 30 Slack channels buzzing, lawyers chasing ghosts through outdated data rooms. Had been the only person who actually knew where things lived. Half the acquisition packet still referred to deprecated microservices we hadn't touched in over a year. I remember sitting across from Zach, a junior paralegal from the buyer's firm, in a stuffy breakout room with terrible coffee and a flickering overhead bulb like we were in some noir crime scene. He was young, smart but green, wore a tie like it owed him money. He said, this clause here, architect of record. It's vague, do you want to tighten it? I looked at it. The original language gave blanket sign-off authority to the CTO or acting technical executive leadership. In other words, Derek, a man who once asked if VPNs were a new kind of protein powder. No, I said, change it. It should name the architect explicitly. Whoever actually built the damn infrastructure. He raised an eyebrow, and that would be? I didn't smile, just handed him a sticky note. Linda M. Clark. He nodded like it was nothing. Scribbled it down. Typed some revision note into his laptop. Didn't even ask for a resume. Cool, he said, I'll add that in. Counsel will review, and that was it. No fireworks, no dramatic music. Just one legal intern with enough caffeine in his veins to blindly follow the only person in the room who looked like they knew what they were doing. 2 days later, he pinged me a confirmation. Confirmed. Language updated per your request. Clause now reads, transfer of IP or licensing requires explicit written consent from designated primary architect LM. Clark as recorded in IP assignment ledger. Buried on page 47, tiny font, no spotlight. That was my insurance policy. I hadn't told anyone, not Derek, not the founder, not even the buyer's higher-ups. I wasn't dumb enough to flaunt a gun before I needed to pull the trigger. I didn't need credit, I needed control. So when Judith was spewing her venom in front of interns and Brittany was playing executive Barbie with her wine flute, I didn't argue, I didn't beg. I went home and made sure the right person had the right document, because I knew something they didn't. The signing ceremony wasn't just a formality, it was a binding event. And that clause, that tiny, overlooked paragraph, it was a grenade. All they had to do was pull the pin, and I had just handed them the string. I leaned back, took a sip of flat ginger ale from a mug that said world's okayest engineer, and smiled. Let them celebrate tonight. Tomorrow, the paperwork would speak. Monday morning hit like a mosquito bite on a sunburn, small, but infuriating in its precision. I opened my laptop out of habit, still wearing the same t-shirt I'd slept in, half a bagel dangling from my mouth, expecting at least a dozen overnight Slack messages from people too scared to make decisions without my blessing. Instead, nothing. Slack didn't load. Just a gray screen and a cheery little pop-up. Your workspace access has been deactivated. Please contact your administrator. I stared at it for a full 30 seconds. Didn't refresh, didn't blink, just let the silence soak in. My email, gone. Internal dashboard access, locked. Calendar, wiped. It was like someone had taken a vacuum hose to my digital existence and sucked me out of the system without a trace. That was the moment it became real. They weren't just erasing me from the table. They were scrubbing me out like a mistake in pencil. But I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I didn't scream at the void or call HR, because I already knew how this game was played, and I'd already placed my piece. Still, bitterness swirled in my chest like old coffee. Burnt, acidic, familiar. I thought I'd be angry. I thought I'd want to storm the office and demand a meeting. But all I felt was cold anticipation, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks when everything goes still and even the birds shut up. I spent the morning cleaning out a junk drawer. I found a decade-old flash drive, 3 AA batteries, and a fortune cookie slip that read, "Your silence will be your strength." No kidding. Around noon, my phone buzzed. A text from Jake, one of our junior developers. Sweet kid, bright, still believed in startup dreams and culture. Jake, hey, are you okay? Jake, they said you quit? I stared at the blinking cursor, considering my options. I could tell him the truth, I could screenshot the clause, I could drop a grenade into their Slack from afar. Instead, I did nothing. No reply, let them wonder. Let the silence grow teeth. Because if they thought I was gone, truly gone, they'd let their guard down, and that's when it would hit hardest. I went for a walk. The fall air cut sharp and smelled like change. When I got back, I checked the acquisition timeline. Still on track, closing meeting in 4 days. The signatures would be finalized in that fancy conference room with the glass walls and curated succulents. The same room where I'd once spent 14 straight hours rebuilding a client deployment pipeline, while the founder hosted a fantasy football draft across the hall. God, the audacity. That afternoon, someone leaked an internal email. Subject, lean, mean, future-facing team. It was from the founder. To the company. Probably written by Brittany, judging from the overuse of the word synergy. Buried in the second paragraph, as we move into this exciting new phase, we're proud to say we've trimmed the fat and streamlined operations. Dead weight removed. The real drivers remain. Dead weight, that was me. No name, no farewell, no acknowledgement. Just erased. Should have hurt more. It probably would have if I hadn't already seen the knife coming. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat back, and opened the live countdown I'd programmed to the acquisition signing. 96 hours, 13 minutes, 42 seconds. The bomb was ticking, and they were whistling on their way to the gallows. Let them gloat, let them strut. Let them think I was just another burned-out workhorse tossed in the ditch before the parade, because the parade was coming. But I owned the float. I walked into the signing like a ghost attending her own funeral. No name tag, no invite, no smiling intern to usher me toward a pastry tray. Just polished glass doors that opened too easily and a room full of polished smiles that never turned in my direction. They didn't expect me. They didn't even consider I might show up. Good, I'd worn a plain navy dress, no makeup, hair in a knot. The same look I'd worn in war rooms, product scrums, and after-midnight bug hunts. It wasn't for them, it was armor. The conference room was theater-dressed, sleek glass walls, sleek people, sleek lies. Everyone was already positioned like chess pieces mid-game. Buyer team to the left, founders crew to the right, and that giant LED screen behind them announcing the $250M acquisition like it was the second coming. I slipped in through the side door. No one noticed. Well, almost no one. Judith Lancaster's head turned, slow and stiff like a motion-activated gargoyle. Her lips thinned. But she didn't speak. She just stared at me like I was a smudge on the glass, something to be Windexed away later by a PA with a master's in theater arts. I took a seat in the back row, the unofficial section for +1s and miscellaneous. No one greeted me. No one asked who I was, which told me everything I needed to know. They really thought I was gone. Derek was mid-banter with someone from the buyer's side, arms crossed too tight to be relaxed, chuckling in that fake please-like-me tone that made your teeth itch. Brittany was Instagramming the embossed logo on the coffee cups. The founder? He looked like a man ready to ascend into startup Valhalla, confident, smug, a little sweaty. And none of them noticed the storm cell parked in the back corner. Me. I crossed my legs, opened my tote, pulled out the hard copy of the contract I'd printed at 2 a.m. that morning. Page 47 was already dog-eared. I didn't need to reread it. I just wanted to feel it in my hands. Remind myself it was real, that no matter how invisible I'd become to these people, my name still lived somewhere they couldn't ignore. Designation: Primary Architect of Record LM. Clark Clause 9b, all post-acquisition licensing or IP transfer requires written consent from said architect. No exceptions. That clause wasn't a request, it was a lock, the kind that clanked shut right as someone tried to open the door. I watched the buyer's lead counsel settle in, papers spread in front of him, pen poised like a surgeon's scalpel. He was older, sharp-eyed, the kind of man who didn't say good morning until he'd audited your soul. He flipped to the first page. I breathed in slowly. Not yet. Let the ceremony play out. Let them toast each other. Let them preen. I wasn't here to interrupt. I was here to observe. Witness the moment they realized their castle had been built on a drawbridge I controlled. I watched Derek whisper something to the founder. Both chuckled. I watched Judith sip from a bone-white teacup like a monarch overseeing a coronation. I watched the buyer's counsel keep flipping. Closer, page 30, page 38, page 44, then silence. He paused, didn't speak, didn't smile. Just held one page up, staring at it like it had grown teeth. I didn't move, didn't flinch, just sat there in the back row with a hand resting calmly on my own copy. I had nothing left to say. The words were already on the paper. All that mattered now was that someone finally read them. Let's begin, the buyer's counsel said, tapping the thick packet of documents like a priest blessing a holy book. His voice was calm, practiced, precise. The kind of voice that could read your last rites and make it sound like a lease agreement. Everyone straightened, phones tucked away, smiles pinned on. Brittany practically levitated with excitement, probably picturing the congratulatory TikTok montage already forming in her head. The founder leaned forward, nodding as if he had personally authored every page. Derek shifted in his seat, arms folded like a linebacker posing for tech blog. Judith sat perched at the head like an empress awaiting tribute. I sat still. Breath slow, spine straight. Page 1. Smooth. Page 4. Legal jargon indemnification clauses. Nod, chuckle. Page 12. Executive shares and vesting schedules. Some light eyebrow lifts, one restrained smirk from the founder. Page 25. Warranty disclaimers. Standard stuff. The buyer's counsel never broke cadence. He read like a man who's done this 100 times and never once hit a pothole. Until page 47. He turned the page. Eyes dropped. Then he stopped. No gasp. No outburst. Just a clean, clinical pause, and then something magical happened. He read the line again. His eyes didn't move to the next paragraph. They went back and back again. Then his brow furrowed, slight but unmistakable. The kind of expression that means something's wrong and I need the room to shut up while I find the loose wire. I saw it from 20 feet away. That furrow was the crack in the dam. A murmur started. The founder leaned in. Is there a problem? The buyer's counsel didn't answer immediately. He simply set the paper down and folded his hands. He glanced at the buyer's executive team, then back at the founder. There's a clause here I need clarification on, he said, cool as a loaded gun. Judith shifted. Which clause? He lifted the page without speaking. Held it like a judge reading a verdict. The primary architect designation and licensing clause, he said flatly. Derek blinked. I don't what clause. The founder leaned in further, squinting like the font had personally offended him. That was part of the old draft, wasn't it? We cleaned that up. The counsel did not smile. No, this clause was updated per revision note 17b. It names a specific architect and places veto power on any future transfer or licensing of proprietary IP unless explicitly approved by the person listed. His eyes scanned the room. And that person is Linda M. Clark. My name didn't explode in the room. It sank, heavy, cold, unavoidable, like a stone tossed into a frozen lake. Brittany's face froze in a half-smile that didn't know whether to stay up or retreat. Derek blinked rapidly, already flipping through his own copy like the clause might vanish under pressure. Judith made a noise halfway between a scoff and a cough. That can't be right, she said, reaching for the nearest copy. She's not even with the company anymore. The counsel ignored her. I'll need clarification from legal on your side, he said, voice smooth as static. Because without written consent from Miss Clark, this deal cannot proceed. The founder opened his mouth, then closed it. Silence, not awkward, not confused, just real, the kind of silence where people stop blinking. I stayed seated, calm, hand resting on the same bookmarked page, watching it land, because the clause didn't shout. It didn't need to, it whispered. And in that whisper was the whole story. She's still here, she still matters, you didn't bury her deep enough. Page 47 was on fire now, and no one wanted to hold it. I need clarification, the buyer's counsel repeated, tapping the clause with his pen like it was a detonator. This language is explicit. Veto power over IP and licensing rights. Designated to a Linda M. Clark. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The weight of those words pulled every gaze toward him like gravity suddenly shifted. The founder's face flickered. First confusion, then recognition, then the start of panic, like a man realizing he's nodding along to a joke that ends with a noose. We thought that was old language, he muttered, suddenly too interested in the table's wood grain. I mean, Linda was on her way out. That clause shouldn't be, Judith cut in. Not with grace. Not with tact, with venom. She's nobody, she snapped, slamming her palm on the table like a gavel. The room flinched. She quit, walked out like a coward. No title, no equity, no say. This entire thing is a clerical oversight. The buyer's counsel didn't even blink. This clause supersedes internal structure, he said, voice flat as courtroom linoleum. It was reviewed, revised, and signed into the final contract. That signature on file, LM. Clark, is binding. Judith's lips parted, ready to throw another tantrum into the fire, but the buyer's lead executive, until now silent, raised a hand. Without her signature, the counsel continued, this acquisition halts. You don't own the IP, you can't transfer it, you can't license it, and you can't sell what you don't control. The room turned to stone. No one spoke, no one moved. The pen, once gliding through terms and initials like it was on rails, now hovered midair, paralyzed. I felt every eye wanting to land on me, but I didn't give them the satisfaction. I didn't gloat, didn't smirk. I didn't even look up from my lap, because they didn't deserve my gaze, not after years of ignoring it. Let them burn in their own surprise. I could feel Judith's stare drilling into the side of my face like heat from an open oven door. I could hear Derek flipping pages as if a different version of reality might be hiding between the margins. Brittany was frozen, still holding her phone mid-Instagram story, now forgotten in her manicured grip. And the founder, he was melting, sweat rising, collar tugged, pulse visible in his temple. He turned to his legal rep. Can we override this, he asked, already knowing the answer but too desperate not to ask. The counsel gave the kind of look lawyers reserve for people who skip the fine print. No, you agreed to it. She was listed. It was flagged. You initialed that section. The founder turned to Judith, whispering something frantic and incoherent. Her response was less a reply than a hiss, fix it, but there was no fix, not today, not without me. The buyer's rep finally broke the silence. Where's Miss Clark? The question didn't echo, but it may as well have, because every head turned, slowly, to me, still seated in the back, still silent, still holding my copy, still very much here. I didn't move, didn't smile. I just let them look, because for the first time in 6 years they really saw me. The room cracked, not with sound, but with motion, sudden, sharp, frantic. Derek was flipping through pages like they were on fire, muttering to himself. Brittany leaned into her phone, furiously texting someone, probably trying to summon a miracle via group chat. Judith was already halfway out of her seat, demanding a private sidebar in a voice that could peel wallpaper. And the founder just stood there, jaw clenched, breathing shallow, watching the ink dry on a deal he no longer controlled. But it was their lawyer who moved first, his chair screeching back with the grace of a man who knows he's about to earn his retainer the hard way. He pulled out a laptop, fingers flying, searching internal email threads like he could reverse time by speed alone. Then he found it. I knew the moment he did. He stopped typing, scrolled once, then again, then sat back. No defense, no rebuttal, just the quiet realization that the clause wasn't a mistake. It was intentional, requested, documented, included, and legally airtight. He looked up at the founder, voice low but firm. She requested the language. We accepted it, you initialed it. That landed like a brick. The founder stared at him like he couldn't believe the betrayal, except it wasn't betrayal. It was negligence, arrogance, the kind of blind confidence that comes from assuming no one outside your little circle can alter the game. Across the table, one of the buyer firm's senior partners, a tall man in a muted gray suit with a face that looked carved from suspicion, stood, quietly, no fanfare. He stepped away from the table and walked the length of the room, past the founders, past their counsel, past Brittany, who looked ready to cry into her blazer. He reached me, stopped, and asked, simply, is this your work? I met his gaze, didn't flinch, didn't blink, just nodded once. Yes, that was all, one word, no embellishment, no defense, no apology, because I wasn't sorry. He studied me for a beat longer than nodded, turned back toward the table like a general returning from enemy lines. Then we won't be signing anything, he said, voice clear and final, unless Miss Clark is formally present. At the table, not in the back, not as a witness, not as an afterthought. At the table, the shift was instant. Judith choked on air. Brittany blinked like a computer crashing. Derek actually opened his mouth to argue, but the buyer's counsel shut it down with a single raised hand. This isn't a suggestion, he said. It's a legal requirement. She holds veto authority. And just like that, the woman they'd erased, ghosted, and tossed aside like last quarter's KPIs became the key to a $250 million deal. They needed me, not as a guest, not as a problem, as a stakeholder, as the architect. The room was suddenly too small for its silence. Everyone looked at me now, not like I didn't belong, but like they were trying to figure out how they ever thought I didn't. I stood up slowly, not for drama, just to stretch, to remind them that I was still very much real. The founder looked like he might be sick. His mother looked like she already was. The buyer's team, they were making space. One chair, unoccupied, waiting. The deal hadn't collapsed, not yet, but the power had shifted. And the person holding the pen was now me. The chair was silent when they pulled it out. No scrape, no announcement. Just the soft thud of legs meeting carpet, final, undeniable. A seat for me. I walked forward slowly, every step slicing through the tension like a box cutter through velvet. I didn't rush. I didn't make eye contact. I didn't need to. Let them feel every second of it. The buyer's rep gestured toward the empty chair at the table. "Miss Clark," he said, with the same casual authority you hear from a judge right before sentencing. "We don't invest in unstable structures. And she," he said, glancing to the founder, then to his team, "is the structure." Judith didn't speak. Her mouth twitched like she was chewing on a lemon rind she couldn't swallow. Her eyes locked on me like she could will me out of existence. But she didn't say a word. The founder looked pale, like he'd been handed a future he no longer recognized. And Derek, he tried for a smirk. Tried to nod at me like this was all part of the plan, like we were in on some inside joke together. But his hand trembled slightly when he lifted his water glass. I sat, the chair creaked gently beneath me. The same seat they'd denied me a week ago. The one they claimed was reserved for closers. Now it was mine. I opened my folder, slid the updated agreement across the table. Buyer's counsel nodded. He'd already had it reviewed. My terms had been attached in the follow-up email they received earlier that morning. A clean, revised version. One that named me technical co-founder. Another that detailed my equity reinstatement, with full back pay and a retention bonus. Non-negotiable. They hadn't argued. They couldn't, because without me they had nothing to sell. The pen passed down the line again. This time it hesitated at me, not out of confusion but recognition. I took it. Signed clean, slow, deliberate. Below my name were the words I had fought for, not with shouting or tantrums or demands, but with precision. Primary architect of record. The room stayed still. No applause, no smiles. Just reality settling in. I capped the pen, slid it back across the table, then met the buyer's eye. "Now we can proceed." That was all, not a speech, not a reckoning, just a fact. Judith looked away. The founder slumped in his chair, lips moving but forming no words. Brittany was already pulling up the clause on her phone, scanning it like maybe she could undo it with an Instagram caption. Too late. It was done. I stood, collected my folder, and walked out without another word. Behind me the papers lay open. My signature, fresh and final. My name in bold, the ink still wet. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit him.